Yeah, so we were talking about acting and how he gets these
Yes,
performances.
yes.
It's you know what it's underrated what great performances are in his films, and often from people who don't shine again in quite the same way in any other
In
film.
any other film.
In
And
any
I
other
think
film.
I think I think actors know how good they look in a Woody Allen film.
Yeah.
I think they do. I think that's why he gets people to appear in
Remember
his
we were
films,
talking
even in
about
brief roles. But there's some kind of magical transition between him and the actor that probably can't be put into words, and we can't codify it, and we're being intrusive perhaps in trying to. But the acting is of such excellence, and they acting in a similar style. There is a Woody Allen style.
well, often there is, and sometimes there isn't, and that's interesting too. But remember, I wrote about Cukor, and he's famous as an actor's director. And he had some saying that was there's seven ways to direct an actor. The first is cast the perfect actor and say nothing. The second is to reassure them. The third one is they want to talk about their part in this, what they're doing in the scene, listen to them carefully. The fourth one is stand up and show them, if they
Uh,
don't know the
That's a
difference.
no-no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That,
And
yes,
Woody
actors don't like that.
Woody Allen does that. Woody Allen does that for Diane Wiest in Bullets Over Broadway. He says, "You want more of this?" He says, "Yes. Watch me. You go like this, and then you go because
Yes,
he's an actor, remember, so he can do it.
he
And
can do it. And she won an Oscar.
he shows her how to flounce down the stairs, and he shows her how to like speak. And she said, "You want me to do that?" He said, "Yes, more of that, more of that." So, and then Cuker's final thing was, and then if they won't do it, you give them a slap across the face and say, "Do it. You're getting paid to do it." And Woody, he doesn't slap people, but he fires people.
When
He
it's not working.
Yeah,
Yes.
when he doesn't like what he sees, or sometimes he always says, change the lines if you don't like them. And then if they change the lines and he doesn't like them, you change them back, you know. So he allows them, but there isn't always a transference. It's sometimes is just the casting, So in Penelope Cruz and her significant other, and Vicky Chris uh, Vicky Barcelona Christie, whatever it's called. Um, he never said a word to them. Once they said, "Can we do one more take?" And he was like, "I don't. Well, it was just fine." And they said, "But can
But
we?"
I would still say he exudes something, and they're performing for him. There
Well,
is somehow a connection, even if it's a mystical one, between him and his actors,
it
because
starts.
there's a uniform quality in most of the films. There is
Well,
a
I
style.
agree. He's a great actor's director, so there has to be some mystical channel of communications. But it
Yes.
begins. It begins with the script, and then it starts with the casting. And after that,
But
when Angelica Houston says, "But I'd like to have lunch with you," he says, "Why? What's the point?" And she has a very articulate description of her first day on the set, where he was giving her no reassurance, very little input, but she was perfectly situated in the scene, that she was doing, and it's a great scene. And she's great. Angelica Houston's often really good, so she's not a great example of
no,
someone
no, but
who's only good
she's
once.
just terrific in that. Just
Yeah,
terrific.
it's just terrific in that scene. Yeah,
Yes.
and better than in Manhattan Murder Mystery later on.
Yes.
Uh, but but
But how much did he allow for improvisation?
look, he himself improvises a little bit, always. So he always did. He always had very carefully written down what he was going to do on stage or in a scene in a film, and he's quite capable of departing. If he feels inspired. So he would say to people, "Go ahead, let me see what you want to do." And then often, if he had really good people, what he did they liked, what they did he liked, so he was open to it. As you know, if you have a really good script, um, he would rather it be better than the script.
Yes.
And
Yes, but he
Sidney's
did
also
hold on. He did not hold his words as sacred text.
no, no. And you're talking about a guy who has more Oscar noms and Screen Actors Guild noms for script than anybody in the history of the cinema. And who knows, he may be surpassed by the Coen brothers or somebody, still. But he set records for everybody. All writers admire Woody Allen. Maybe all actors don't, but they should because he's a great actor. He's a great actor.
He's a terrific actor, but he is a terrific actors director. I would put him almost in the league with Elia Kazan, who I think is the greatest of all a director of actors. But Woody Allen's doing something different. But
He's as
his
good as anyone.
there's a style. There is a style to his films. It's visual, it's literary, and it's performative. And it has his imprint. Something is transferred between him and his actors.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's strangely an intimacy and often a warmth that everybody says in person doesn't exist. So it's another way in which the films really are not Woody, but they're a version of Woody.
I wanted to talk also about the distinctive look of Woody Allen films. You mention frequently in your book his preference for master shots and long takes and a minimum of intercutting. That's also very actor friendly because it allows actors to play the scene, to have a sense of continuity and fullness.
Yeah. And there's very little rehearsal. He did a lot of rehearsal on interiors, and it upset everybody who was rehearsing, which was the older actresses. And so he liked it. And after a while, after like 1992, especially, the camera's following the actors, whatever the actors do, or up to, in the 1990s and then beyond, so that it's staged. It's very visually thought out. And he learned a lot from Gordon Willis in that respect. But he also learned as you go along, you see this guy from this, rather humble upbringing, learning about costumes, learning about staging, learning about scenery, decor, color. And people come along like Diane Keaton, with her sense of design and dress, and he soaks it up. It informs his thinking. He had a girlfriend who lived in the Upper East Side, who later became his second wife, and that influenced his idea of interiors and elegance, and how the elegance of an interior can be a code for the interior of someone's dysfunctionality.
But
Um,
he's very interested in that kind of decor and look. His films are meticulous as to mise en scène,
absolutely,
meticulous.
absolutely, and it's important to say that he's doing all of this on a bargain basement budget. Always, his budgets are not big. They sort of get big by the end of the 1980s, and then they start shrinking again. So he's doing spectacular things out of his own imagination, and he'll reject colors. And he'll say, no, I don't like blue jeans. They shouldn't wear blue jeans in this scene. So
But
it's you have this feeling of like being in a boutique, where everything is handcrafted for you. The drink that you're served as they're showing you the costume they're trying to get you to buy, dressed, worn by a model who is the kind of model who's going to appeal to you as you look at the costume. He's thinking he thinks first of as the writer, and then he learned to think as a director. I think starting with the late funny comedies in the mid '60s and then '70s, and then Annie Hall as a real burst of directorial vision. And that's very cutty, though. But the long scenes are often improvised, and the long scenes are not really improvised in terms of what people say, but in the staging. We'll do this. The camera will follow you.
so he
Eventually,
allowed the actors to move, and the camera follows the movement of the
absolutely,
actors,
absolutely.
which gives the films a very different look from the standard American movie, which
Yeah,
depends so much on cutting, cutting, cutting all the time.
yeah.
And he doesn't do
He's not a montage or a shock cutter
not
at,
at all,
at all.
not at all.
Even in the great crime movies, Crimes and Misdemeanors or Match Point, no. There's a lot of tension and suspense, but he doesn't do that. He's not interested in. It's funny because there's a scene in the book where he sits around and talks with Alfred Hitchcock because Hitchcock had two things: moving camera, and the other thing was, Soviet kind of cutting. And
Yes.
but he doesn't do Soviet cutting.
He doesn't do Soviet. He is not a montage director.
No,
He's a mise en scène director. And the mise en scène is so important.
yeah.
Who would you say are his major influences? If I said Bergman and Antonioni, would I be far off the mark?
Visually and maybe even in reaching for depth, which he does noticeably on occasion. And then you could argue he often is doing it without being noticeable about it. Yeah, but before that, really, it's Groucho Marx and Bob Hope, and maybe Buñuel, because he's basically a surrealist, and every once in a while, and he's a fantasist, and every once in a while, he's a little bit like Husbands and Wives, is a very naturalistic drama, which could be almost be Italian neorealism, even though
Yeah.
it's not realistic, it's very naturalistic. But yeah, I mean, Bergman for depth of thinking and Woody in some movies. But I think even in the movies that are like Deconstructing Harry is a takeoff on Wild Strawberries. And Wild Strawberries is a very deep, I would say profound film. And Deconstructing Harry, I think, is a rather profound meditation on Woody and on being a writer and on being a person who has sacrificed all the happiness of a private life for his like public life, which only gives him pleasure when he's sitting at the typewriter finishing, whatever he has tried to write. So that's a Bergman film. Antonioni, he tries for Antonioni and he tries for bleak Bergman, and Interiors, which, by the way, Interiors didn't get a single vote from 100 plus critics as the
Yeah,
five.
it's my least favorite Woody Allen film, my least favorite. I can't stand it.
Oh,
And by the way, I knew Geraldine Page
yeah.
and I asked her about it. And she said, I got good reviews for that film, but I did not like it at all. I didn't like my character. I didn't like the film.
Yeah, and it got a lot of Oscar. It was very respected at the time. But anyway, he was reaching for something Bergman-esque in that. But Stardust Memories is Fellini,
Yes, it is.
and there are many Fellini type movies that Woody makes. Like I think the one where he's trying to figure out if his adopted child, he meets the prostitute who's the mother of his adopted child. That's like a Fellini scenario, I mean, that's surreal. Broadway Danny Rose it's like Damon Runyon, but it's also like Fellini, like when they go into the big giant balloon factory and they
He's
toss
very
voices.
he's so distinctive, but he's also very open to influences
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
can be a bit of a hero worshiper. There are directors that he just falls in love with,
yeah, yeah, and
and he does try to
particularly,
emulate their work.
yeah, and particularly, I mean, like, but he doesn't like he's in love with DeSica, which is a good choice,
Yes,
if
it
you
is.
have to choose among the 5 or 10 greatest ever. But he doesn't try to import DeSica, except maybe in Cassandra's Dream, maybe, but not really. That kind of ultra realistic and very, very bleak approach. I mean, he does bleak in Deconstructing Harry and Stardust Memories, but it's bleak comedy.
But
And and DeSica is not very funny.
no, he's not. But Woody Allen takes influences from many, many different places.
Yeah,
But I think ultimately the work emerges as that of Woody Allen. He's
absolutely.
open to influences, but it's ultimately his work and his sensibility.
Yeah. Well, because he's influencing it from so many directions. We're talking about the visual and the mastery of direction, and then the mastery of writing, and then the mastery of acting, which he has himself. He's a great
Though
actor.
he,
And
though he
then,
claimed to not to be, but he certainly was.
yeah, oh yeah, I think there's some performances where, I mean, even like Broadway Danny Rose, which is you'd have to say a minor film that is a minor masterpiece. His acting is terrific. Her acting should have won an Oscar, for that performance.
Absolutely.
Everybody in the movie is perfect, and the movie is hilarious, and he's absolutely great playing this Damon Runyon kind of agent, which is another variation on himself. But was John Wayne a great actor? Yes, and but there are things he couldn't do, but what he did really great, and
He
at
did
times,
what
really,
he did better than anybody else. He
that's right,
didn't have range. Woody
right.
Allen does not have range as an actor, but
No,
what he does better than anybody else.
right. He never himself does drama, and he worried about it. You see, there's some private correspondence, well, it was professional correspondence in the book where he worried about how he could handle serious material. So I think, he comes closest in maybe the front. But Husbands and Wives is a very serious movie, and Crimes
Well,
and Misdemeanors is a
well,
very serious movie.
I think his masterpiece is Crimes and Misdemeanors. That film is haunting. I've never forgotten it.
And I think it's
It has
profound. I
stayed
think
with
it's
me.
profound.
It's profound. It's
Yeah, and
profound.
people who don't like Woody, or people who went back, you talk about people going back and rereading films differently. They see that as like Woody saying, "Hey, people can get away scot-free with terrible crimes," but that's not the way he said it. He said it's a terrible thing, but people get away with crimes.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
it's not presented as something affirmative. It's
no,
presented as a
no.
sort of a horrifying view of the universe.
No, and I agree. It's a very masterful film. Still holds up brilliantly. And Woody is kind
Extraordinary.
of the comedy relief, but not really, because Alan Alda sort of is too.
Yes. No, but in a way, and you don't emphasize this in the book, perhaps, but I feel that his films often speak to each other, so that the bleak ending of Crimes and Misdemeanors is in some way in dialogue with the affirmative happy endings of Hannah and her sisters.
Yeah,
Everything comes out in that film,
yeah,
the
and
characters, and everything goes wrong in
yeah,
Crimes and Misdemeanors,
yeah. Well, I think that's
and they
true.
speak to each other.
And his natural instinct is to be bleak, and because he thinks, and I think this is intelligent and wise, that there is no happy ending. In real life, there's no happy ending. He's not depicting real life, but he doesn't want to present, he wants to make you laugh, but he doesn't want,
But
you to think
there
that
are
there's
happy
ending.
endings.
Yes,
Hannah and her sisters has a wonderful rainbow at the end. Everything's tied up and they're happy endings.
I
But
agree.
Crimes and Misdemeanors is the anti Hannah and her sisters.
Yeah.
I feel his films are in dialogue with each other often.
I agree. I agree. And often they are rewritten parts of other films that he saved, so he wants to figure out how to do them. And then he has an idea that ties in with what he did before.
No, he can't stop, which made your book as long as it is. He's a compulsive worker.
Yeah.
Did he make too many films?
I find that argument to be very funny, meaning amusing. Remember, I wrote a book about Robert Altman, which ends before has his big comeback with The Player. Nobody in the American cinema up to that time was prolific like Robert Altman. That guy never stopped. He made 1 to 2 movies a year. Half of them are not good, or not really great, and in general, though, he has about as high a percentage of masterpieces or amazingly great films as any director ever. He couldn't stop. What did you want him? People want him to do? Go to the beach and get a suntan, or like read books? He read books. Very intelligent guy. He was nose to the grindstone about what he did. He wasn't obsessive, compulsive. He wasn't a workaholic. I don't think Woody is either. I think Woody knows what gives him pleasure and he does it. And after he's done with that, he needs to go back to the typewriter or start making another movie. So I don't like that argument. And also, again, when you do the poll of people saying what are among the 50 movies do you like, you get 35 different answers as to his 5 or 10 best. So he's doing even really, really the last movie that he made that was in French, Coup de Chance, is a wonderful movie. It's a wonderful movie. And Rainy Day in New York, which was the 2 films before that, which nobody saw. Also, wonderful movie. So even in his 80s, he's making wonderful movies. Well, we don't
Is
have,
he still working on a
I
project?
don't, he hasn't said, he has said that he has said that if there was money and, because money's always a problem, and somebody seduced him with talk of money and easy, it's not going to be hard, and that maybe they would do an Italian film. They'd do a film in Italy as opposed to
But
France.
there's no announced Woody Allen
No,
project at the
no,
moment.
no,
There's
no,
nothing. Okay.
no.
Now, did you get to see him at all? Did you talk to him?
No, no,
Did you
no.
try?
No, I didn't, except with the one caveat that I went to the Cafe Carlyle one night and had dinner and sat by the door where he enters and exits. And the waiter, I just was having dinner watching the show, and the waiter came over and said, he comes right by you. I could stop him for a second and take a picture of you and Woody. And I thought for a second, that would be really great as a dust jacket picture, but it's so sycophantic or something. The waiter was very disappointed because he would have gotten a tip for it and it was so easy. He said, Woody doesn't care. I just stop you and you take a picture. And I said, no. But the show was great. Um, my agent is Gloria Loomis, and she was married to Walter Bernstein. So that road was open to me. I have 10,000 interviews with him. And if I phoned him, he'd probably answer the phone. I don't, I didn't have anything to ask him that no one else had ever asked him before, except maybe one question that he might leap across the table or die of apoplexy to be asked, which would be a disrespectful question of some sort. So I don't bother people who have written their memoirs. I don't bother people who have given 10,000 interviews. I sat across from Eve Marie Saint at a Hitchcock dinner once and listened to her for, hour and a half as she told anecdotes. Didn't write anything down, didn't tell her I was writing a book about Hitchcock, didn't ask for an interview, didn't hear anything I had never heard her say before.
Yes.
And
So,
I respected her by not saying, hey, can I have 30 minutes alone with you while you repeat the same things to me?
so
That
you
was
feel
my
that
that,
you
that was
feel
my
that your
attitude.
your attitude about interviewing Woody is that you would have heard what other people have heard. He would have said what he said before.
Yeah, he's not evasive. He doesn't dodge interviews. The opposite. I'm puttering away on a book about Catherine Deneuve now. I say I'm puttering, and people say, well, are you going to interview her? So, probably not. I mean, she's 82 or 83. I'm going to ask her about things that happened when she was 23. It's impertinent, be impertinent. Say, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, believe it or not, there's several hundred interviews with Catherine Deneuve in English. And then there's several thousand in French, So, and she's been asked everything. And by the way, she won't answer everything. Like Woody actually answers almost anything you ask him. All right. But there are things she won't answer. So you don't even dare ask her, have you had a facelift? Actually, Terry Gross asked her if she had a facelift. And she said, I never answer that question. But Terry, because you're being nice and because you asked, I'm going to tell you the answer. But then I'm going to tell you why I never answer it. But there are things she won't answer. Woody answers everything. Out of respect, I did not bother him.
Have you heard from him since the book's been published?
No, I would be very surprised. Jack Nicholson told a reviewer once who called him up and said, what do you think of McGilligan's book? And he said, it makes me feel like I'm dead. And they said, are you going to read it? He said, why would I read it? I, cons- I consider that a very intelligent reaction to somebody writing a book about him.
Now, when we talked earlier, you said that your publishers, Harper, kind of threw up their hands about the book. What did you
Well,
mean by that?
the true thing is that, the book was contracted, 4 or 5 years ago, before the second wave of Me Too took Woody under. Okay. So at that time, it looked like Woody was going to survive a lot of these, public accusations and hysterical comments about him. And I was paid well. I was glad for the job. I did my job. By the time the book was delivered, they were all nervous because the reality was the market no longer existed. My editor edited it, it went through copy editing. The lawyer vetted it, and right around the time it was going into a galleys, it was in the Wall Street Journal that Woody had attended several soirees at Jeffrey Epstein's house. They lived nearby, they're neighbors, and um, and that means he went to group dinners because Jeffrey Epstein would gather a bunch of people together and tell the other ones that the other ones are coming, and then he'd serve great food. And who knows what they do, but they talk. Sometimes they would have a topic like, the environment, and they invite environmental experts. There was no details, of course, in the Wall Street Journal, but HarperCollins went into a freeze. Uh, my editor subsequently departed. Um, then almost a year went by in which it was seemed pretty clear they were not going to do the book. They were just going to withdraw.
Oh,
And
really?
I had a new editor, but my early conversations with her were very unpromising and very, I wouldn't say cold, but they were cool, you know. And I just wanted to get paid because I felt the book was permanently of value, but when they say that it was of not great value in the marketplace, I couldn't argue with them. But I wanted to get paid, and then I would be happy to have the rights returned to me. And then suddenly, after about a year had gone by, or certainly 9 months, remember it had been vetted, it had been copy edited, it had been edited, all the drafts were done. The editors suddenly got back in touch and said, we're scheduling it for the spring. Why? I do not know. I would say my guess is that she either read it or she passed someone in the corridor who said, "What's going on with the McGillian book? It's really good," or something. Um, but being publishers, they go into meetings, they say, "We're going to have a big success. We're going to have a big success." They talk that way regardless. And by the time it was then published, I think they were convinced, it would be a disaster, and they no longer really wanted to put any money, throw good money after bad, or bad money after good, either
So
way.
they haven't given you any publicity, no tours, no
No, no,
traveling around.
but mostly there are no tours, nowadays anyway. Only for very, very important people or people who have it in their contract. By the way, I had a big, meeting with them with Zoom with publicity and advertising. They said, we're going to do this, 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 and how can you help? How can you help? And this is the first time I ever saw my editor's face, and um, and they were very nice. My opinion was they had big eyes, considering, their all the emanations they had sent to me otherwise, that they had big eyes, they might sell it to Vanity Fair, that, this kind of talk. But, I'm happy for big eyes. It's better than nothing. But that was the last time I heard from any of them.
And so basically nothing. Basically
Yeah,
nothing.
but basically, I'm not suffering. I'm not unusual. Basically, it is nothing. I mean, basically, they say to you before every book, this is true of Mel Brooks, it was true of, Orson Welles, uh, right all the way back. They say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then they don't do anything because it means spending money. And then they're worried about sales. And I don't sell high numbers. I'm not a big seller. My advance is usually all I ever see. They don't like that anymore as much. So I used to be valuable as film literature. So they would say, well, it's a great book. It's going to be on the shelves forever. So, for example, the Hitchcock book, Foster, you like this kind of nuts and bolts talk, I'm sure. They overpaid. It didn't make any money for 10 years. No money. And it didn't get great reviews. And now every year it makes money, both from foreign rights and from selling in America. So they had to wait 10
You
years.
have to take a long range view, and that may happen with Woody Allen because
Right.
there
By the
will
way, they
be
did sell, they did
critical
sell foreign rights.
revaluation.
What?
There will be a critical revaluation of
I think
Woody
there
Allen,
will be. It sold
which
for
will
it's
have an impact on the market value of your book.
Yeah, it sold foreign rights before it was published. HarperCollins did a good job selling foreign rights before it was published. So I've never sold foreign rights before my book was published, except dating way back to the 80s and 90s when they were selling to England, separately. So look, I don't fault them because it was a bad circumstance of like spending good money on a book that eventually the market looked bad for.
But I think in the long range, the market will be good for it because I do think Woody Allen will be considered historically one of the greatest of all American directors.
I
And the
think so. I think so
scandal
too.
will
And
take its place as just part of the story and not the whole story.
yeah, I think that's true. And I write for an international market anyway. I don't write just for the US, and I make half my money in foreign rights and other things that happen besides in America. And my books, look, I think Tender Comrades was done for $5,000. I think Oscar Michaud, which nobody wanted to do, was done for very little money. And those books are still in print and they still do well. They do okay.
You have to take a long range view. And I just want to tell, I'm so glad we had this chance to talk because I don't think you've had enough publicity because this is a really good and important book. And I think it will stand the test of time, as Woody Allen's films will stand the test of time. All of them, in fact, the good, bad, and indifferent ones. He's
Yes.
an important major filmmaker, and you're a major biographer. And thank you so much for speaking to us.